We're about to enter the new generation of consoles, and thanks to the biggest leap in hardware capabilities in the entire gaming history, we have no idea what sort of improvements we'll get to see aside from the obvious jump in graphical fidelity. That also means we got a clean slate where we'll see two of the biggest racing game franchises clashing against each other. Gran Turismo and Forza Motorsport have for years been synonymous to racing games, sparkling heated debates over which one looks, sounds, and feels better, but as someone who enjoys both games, that's not what I'm gonna be covering in this video. What I wanna talk about instead is possibilities. More specifically, which one looks more promising. As of the time I'm recording this video, we don't have a whole lot to go on as we only got glimpses of what we can expect from Gran Turismo 7 and just a small teaser of the upcoming Forza Motorsport game. But if we take a look at what's been going on with both franchises over the past decade, we can make some educated guesses as to where they're headed now. But before I get started, I need to put things in context. Gran Turismo as a franchise was responsible for bringing a more realistic driving experience to the masses back in the PS1 era. And it's important to understand that whenever I say realistic or simulation over the course of this video, it means as realistic or sim-like as a game could get at the time of its release. For many years, Gran Turismo remained as the dominant franchise and the game to go to if you wanted to have a simulation-like experience in an era that was pretty much dominated by arcade racers. Forza Motorsport was Microsoft's answer to Gran Turismo on the original Xbox, and it's not an exaggeration to say the original Forza game was built upon Gran Turismo while taking a step further to create its own identity. And starting with the Xbox 360 era, Forza took the crown to become the dominant player in sim racing on consoles. Forza Motorsport 3 and later Forza Motorsport 4, which to this day still remain as a fan favorite, were both praised for its graphics, sound, and handling that were unlike anything else seen on consoles before. Gran Turismo 5 was Polyphony Digital's attempt at taking their crown back, but with an underwhelming game on their hands, Turn 10 remained the kings of that genre for years to come, with Gran Turismo 6 also proving not good enough to put up a fight. In particular, the sounds on both Gran Turismo games of the PS3 era were the laughingstock of the community, with people often comparing it to vacuum cleaners and washing machines. But then, along with the release of the Xbox One, Forza Motorsport started feeling like it was going through the motions. The franchise had become too comfortable with what they managed to conquer over the previous era. Little to no innovation was offered entry after entry, with certain aspects that used to be the selling points of each of their games getting worse in quality over time. Most notably its sounds, and after the third game released on Xbox One alone, it was clear something was wrong. The franchise had lost its sparkle and almost none of what used to be praised about its games was the same anymore. It was still graphically impressive, but the sounds went from great to awful and the handling was tweaked so much over time that cars lost all signs of the personality they once had, and everything started handling pretty much the same. It was clear it was time for a change. Enter Polyphony Digital with Gran Turismo Sport at a time expectations for anything developed by the studio were lower than they've ever been after the pretty and remarkable games they released over the PS3 era. And I seriously doubted GT Sport would be any good, let alone be good enough to fight against Forza, a franchise that despite having lost its sparkle, it was as good as it gets on consoles. And well, I was wrong. If you need proof that things can turn around in an instant, you don't need to look any further than Gran Turismo Sport. Polyphony Digital had once again kicked the doors open and took their crown back, and the curious thing is, nobody saw that coming. The arrival of Gran Turismo Sport was the wake-up call, or should I say slap on the face, Turn 10 Studios needed as the studio started showing a behavior never before seen in the history of the Forza franchise. With beautiful graphics, awesome sounds, cars handling better than ever, and possibly one of the best post-launch support of any racing game, Gran Turismo Sport showed they meant business. And business it was, as Gran Turismo Sport was also the sole responsible for bringing the esports side of racing games into the spotlight with its FIA-sanctioned tournaments taking place across the world, making it into a true spectacle worthy of mainstream attention. Being the first console game to properly adopt a penalty and ranking system that separated players onto different pools based on skill and sportsmanship levels, Gran Turismo Sport made it very obvious what a game carrying motorsport in its name had been lacking for all these years. Turn 10 Studios knew they needed to respond, and in an unprecedented move, for the very first time the studio finally started addressing community feedback and actually implemented features that the players had been asking for years, making Forza Motorsport 7 the first game where the studio offered proper post-launch support other than paid expansions. And with a mass of people flocking over to Gran Turismo Sport, including some big YouTubers who used to dedicate their content to Forza exclusively, it was clear Turn 10 Studios was scrambling to keep whatever audience they had left in what felt more like an afterthought than a properly planned out post-launch content roadmap, especially when you realize the post-launch support started on the game's second year rather than right after launch. And that takes us to where we are now. With a generation of consoles on the horizon, both studios are sure to put out the very best, and the stakes couldn't have been higher, especially on the Forza Motorsport side of things. The Gran Turismo franchise has proven they're able to not only reinvent themselves, but also keep improving upon what they have built. Forza Motorsport, on the other hand, has a lot to prove, and that raises the question: can they reinvent the formula that once brought them success, and most importantly, can they keep up with the times and offer what players are looking for when they buy their game, creating an ever-evolving platform? While we have no evidence of that, they have a lot to lose if they don't get it together, so I do believe they're definitely going to try and pull all stops to prove the community they still got it. Judging by what we have seen on the brief trailer they showed at the PlayStation 5 showcase, Gran Turismo 7 looks set to build upon the foundation they created with GT Sport. If GT Sport is the online-focused game of the franchise, Gran Turismo 7 is very likely to be the other half, the offline portion that a lot of us missed from the PS4 game. They're obviously playing off for nostalgia for the older games with that completely revamped but totally recognizable overhead map that serves as a menu. The question is, will we get a full-fledged career right from the start, or will they adopt the same strategy as with GT Sport, with new events being added with every update? And I think we're gonna get a mix of both. We could very well be seeing a career mode that matches the old games at launch, but nothing is stopping them from adding new events on a regular basis as they add more cars and tracks. And speaking of which, new cars and tracks are a safe bet to place. Polyphony Digital post-launch work has been nothing short of stellar with GT Sport, and the studio deserves praise for bringing a lot of totally new fictional circuits that are sure to be ported over to Gran Turismo 7. So far, we know Trial Mountain is in the game, as the trailer they showed takes place entirely on that track. Deep Forest was originally confirmed for GT Sport in an interview with Kazunori Yamauchi a few years ago, but as we know, it never made its way into the game, so I take it will be added to Gran Turismo 7 instead. And that leaves us with tons of other tracks from previous games that could potentially be added to GT7 as post-launch content. And also there's the possibility that Polyphony Digital might end up creating even more completely new fictional circuits for the upcoming game. As a track guy myself, there's a lot to be excited about. As for cars, we can expect most if not all GT Sport cars to be included in GT7 at launch, with even more added over time. As to which cars are going to be included, it's difficult to tell, but I would personally be happier if they added more track-focused cars rather than road-going variants. Regardless of what I expect, I'm sure that'll be enough to please both sides. However, I would forget about those ridiculous car counts of the PS3 games, and let's be real, who needs 10 different variations of the exact same car model? The reason why that was at all possible in the first place is that most of the cars, the so-called standard ones, were just straight ports from the PS2 games, while the premium cars were built from the ground up for Gran Turismo 5 and 6, and there was a huge difference in quality between the two. Kazunori Yamauchi expressed his desire to move away from that idea and focus only on premium cars moving forward before GT Sport came out, and I think the possibility of getting cars ported straight over from the PS3 games into GT7 are slim to none, and I'm glad that's the case. There's no need to have a game launching with over 1,000 cars when you're probably only going to drive just a small fraction of those cars over the game lifespan anyway. There's a lot of room for improvement on their penalty and collision detection system, and I know the PS5 is going to allow for more complex scenarios to be accounted for, and that could make the whole thing a lot better. So there's potential there, and I think that's an area Polyphony Digital is going to double down. We could also be getting a Spectator Mode for both sport and FIA races as well. The backend is definitely there, as we have seen multiple times during the FIA sanctioned World Tours. It's just a matter of making that part of the game available to all players. Those who played the beta months before the game's launch might remember the head bobbing and look into corner camera motions when driving in cockpit. Unfortunately, both were removed from the final game, but we can clearly see they're still there in the World Tour races. Whatever reason Polyphony Digital had to remove them from the game, there's still a chance we might see them back with Gran Turismo 7. Polyphony Digital has shown its willingness to mess around with the physics and overall balance of the cars in the game. There's been a number of changes to the tire model and handling characteristics that overhaul the driving experience since the game came out, and one area I think GT Sport is still lacking is in the fun aspect of driving the road cars available. Cars featured in groups 2, 3, and 4 are a joy to drive, but anything in the end categories is spotty at best, so there's a chance they might focus on improving that aspect to bring it more in line with the drivability of the proper racing cars. GT Sport marks the first time in the franchise history where driving with a controller actually felt enjoyable, and I think things are looking even more promising in this regard with the DualSense, which will allow the developers to explore things such as different haptic feedback to simulate different surfaces, and even the amount of tire wear. The adaptive triggers should also help better simulate some of that feeling that only wheel users get by making both the L2 and R2 buttons feel physically harder to press under wheel spin and wheel lock. That's probably the aspect of the game I'm most excited to check out for myself when the game comes out. Lastly, sound is also a very promising department for Gran Turismo 7, and as a studio known for being on the cutting edge of a console capabilities, it's guaranteed they'll take full advantage of the dedicated audio hardware on the PS5 to improve the sound design even further. Forza Motorsport, on the other hand, has a lot more room to grow. Graphics need to show more of a generational leap with better and more consistent lighting, and sound has absolutely no excuse to suck this time around on a console that finally has dedicated audio hardware. Handling could be brought back to the old days where you could actually feel a difference from car to car. My biggest concern when it comes to reinventing the franchise is identity. Over the years, a lot of racing franchises have morphed into something that's far from what made them popular in the first place. Two examples I can give you are Ridge Racer and Need for Speed, and I definitely don't want Forza Motorsport to go down the same direction. What makes Forza Forza needs to stay, and I realize that this varies from person to person, but personally there are three core pillars that make Forza what it is. buttery smooth handling with a controller, the mix of arcade-style racing with simulation-like characteristics that have given the Forza franchise much of its personality, and community-driven tuning. And these absolutely need to stay regardless of what direction Turn 10 Studios decides to take with it. I don't want it veering too much into hardcore simulation territory and losing its identity in the process. They need to reinvent themselves, but not to the point of becoming a faceless blob in an attempt to please an audience that's not their core player base. Before I move on to my next topic, I want to show you something the developer had to say about the upcoming game last week.
The new Forza Motorsport is a reimagining of the franchise. It's taking what has made Forza great over the last 15 years and pairing that with great new game concepts. What was just announced is that the new Forza Motorsport is in early development and that ray tracing is coming to Forza Tech. Now, Forza Tech is the underlying engine that powers both Forza Motorsport as well as Forza Horizon, bringing all of that technical innovation and power to both of those great franchises. For me and for the team, connection really is at the heart of this next generation of Forza Motorsport, allowing players to build bonds and create new friendships and build communities that can last a lifetime. You know, we have such incredible passion for cars here at the studio. We want to share that love of cars with you. Our longtime fans will be extremely excited about this new experience, but also we believe that there's a bunch of new fans that are just waiting to discover the fun of the Forza community. We can't wait to tell you more.
This statement is something that the developers have been echoing as far back as over a year ago. They know the community isn't happy with the direction Forza Motorsport games have taken over the course of the current generation, and what Chris Sasaki said on this video you just watched might give you an idea of where the franchise is headed next. There are a number of things we can speculate based on that, and some of them rumors have been corroborating for a while now. We could be seeing a return to the calendar style progression of the older games. I'm not sure how I feel about that one though. If we're talking about the calendar style we had in Forza Motorsport 3, then I'll just go ahead and say I'm not a fan. I never got into that style of progression, and at times it felt really stiff and boring. Now, if we're talking about the evolution of the calendar style progression we saw in Forza Motorsport 4, then I'm in because that type of progression opens the door to a lot of different stuff if the developers are creative enough to really push things in that regard. And they absolutely need to make it fun. It's okay to focus on the motorsport aspect, but since this is a game and not a simulator like Assetto Corsa, there needs to be game aspects about it, and I like to see them really doing some crazy stuff with it. They said they're reworking all of their simulation models, but that alone is not enough to make me hopeful if the last 3 games are anything to go by. And it's not that the handling in Forza Motorsport sucks. I actually like it better than Gran Turismo's, but the handling feels the same across all cars without any of the small nuances present in Gran Turismo Sport, and I like them to go back to doing exactly that. We have to wait and see if that's the case, but I would put this down as a possibility. Build, not bought. That's an idea Chris Sasaki has mentioned over and over again throughout 2019, and without getting to the woods with this one, I'll just say that as long as it doesn't hurt the core progression of the game and as long as it doesn't mean the end of the community-driven tuning aspect, I'm all for something different like that. One way I could see this one go is assigning individual car levels, meaning that the more you race with certain cars, the better it will get as you unlock more parts for it. But if that's the case, how would the community create shareable tuning setups that anyone can download? That's the aspect of this possibility I don't like. Off-roading is a rumor that's been going on for years now, but again, not sure how I feel about that one either. You could argue Gran Turismo games have always featured some off-road tracks, but that's never been the focus of the franchise, and I honestly never understood the point. I don't think there's a place for off-roading in the next Forza Motorsport game, but regardless of how I feel, I think there's a very likely possibility they might end up expanding the game onto different types of motorsport events like Rallycross, and Forza Motorsport 7 already have the cars for that. The developers have also said they have revamped their content creation pipeline so that they can be more agile when it comes to adding new tracks, cars, and even making adjustments to the game overall, and that alone is the thing that makes the most promising case for the upcoming Forza Motorsport game. Over the entire lifespan of Forza Motorsport 7, no new tracks have been added. None. Zero. And that's a stark contrast when you compare it to what GT Sport has been doing since launch. It needs to change, and the developers know that. And I'm happy they're building towards a future where we'll finally get new stuff added to their games other than just cars. But which one do I think is the most promising? Well, Gran Turismo Sport has built a very solid foundation for the franchise as a whole, and by building on top, Gran Turismo 7 is only going to become even better, and I think for that reason alone, Gran Turismo 7 is the most promising of the two. But as a franchise that pretty much got stuck in time, Forza Motorsport has a lot more room to grow in unexpected directions, so I see more potential in it than Gran Turismo 7. But at the same time, Forza is the one that has the biggest chance of disappointing their audience. That said, at the moment I'm way more excited for Gran Turismo 7 than Forza Motorsport because I know regardless of which direction they go with for this one, it's going to be good, while I'm not entirely sure about that with Forza Motorsport. I don't expect any of the aspects I loved about GT Sport to change drastically over the transition to Gran Turismo 7, so I sorta know what to expect. Turn 10 Studios have an uphill battle ahead of them, and whether they'll eventually come out on top, only time will tell. I'll be sure to keep an eye out for that one, but this is a good time to be a racing game fan, and I'm looking forward to watching this battle from up close. Let me know in the comments down below which one you think looks more promising and which one you're more excited about. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Bye.